Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second part of diving through discographies with Linkin Park. I tried to put this particular video out a couple of different times, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to do it. Thursday, I wrote it up, finished it around 12:30. When I was trying to actually record it, I started falling asleep, and while that would have been funny to watch, it wouldn't have been good content. Friday I had plans, so unfortunately I wasn't able to do it then. Saturday I had recorded it and after work was going to put it up. But I noticed that while I was editing it, the video kept freezing and that kept making it out of sync to the audio. So today's Sunday and I'm going to be putting up a video I should have been putting out Thursday. But that's not going to change the number of videos that you're going to get. You'll still get this one. You'll still get a cover song on Monday and an RU one on Tuesday, and then either Wednesday or Thursday I'll put out the next diving through discography. So if you haven't watched the first one, I highly recommend that you do. It goes over the formation of the band as well as the history behind Hybrid Theory and its impact on music and on the band. So that's that, and we're going to start talking about part 2. So, for a band that sold they created an album that sold 30 million copies worldwide and 13 million in the United States alone, at least of now, where do you go from there? Well, you start touring. So from late 2000 to about early 2002, the band toured all around the country and a little bit of the world. And while that was going on, they started working on some more material around 2001 while they were touring. Around that time, they also dropped Reanimation. I have reviewed that particular album. It's an awesome album. And it's a remix album of Hybrid Theory that was produced by Shinoda. So that is a catalyst for how they were going to approach this next album, because after producing these Reanimation, the band wanted to co-produce their next album. So around early 2002, they started working a little bit harder on this album. They went to Mike's home studio, and basically the band worked in pairs during the writing process while Shinoda was also involved in writing all of the songs. They recorded a little bit there using Pro Tools as well as just recording live. And then at the end of June, pre-production terminated and they headed into main studio to work on main production with Don Gilmore. And he was the one that produced Hybrid Theory, so they already had a little bit of connection with him. By August, they entered NRG Studios to record the rest of the album. Most of the songs have been finished, but they worked on some of the other songs while they were also finalizing a track list. And basically, from August to December, they worked on finishing up this album. Drum tracks were finished by October. Guitar parts were being introduced around that time. At the end of October, also bass parts were introduced by Farrell, with Gilmore helping out because Gilmore was a bassist. Hans samples were finished a month before deadline. At the same time, Mike finished the recording of Breaking the Habit with strings arranged by David Campbell. Voice production started in November, and the mixing process finished in NYC in December. So musically, it's a little bit different. The band wanted to experiment a little bit more with electronics and different instruments, including an instrument called the shakuhachi, which is a Japanese flute made of bamboo that's on one particular track. Basically, they wanted to go all out. They made an amazing album, and they were just going for broke. They wanted to see what they could make with house money, if you will. The name itself, Meteora, comes from a mountain range in Greece, and it's basically this epic place where there's also monasteries, and that's what Shinoda wanted. He wanted something that was big and grandiose for the name of the album. Like I said, musically, it has a lot of the rap metal and new metal sounds, but with that experimentation. Lyrically, it's kind of the same elements: depression, isolation, anger, anxiety, recovery, all these things. So the band dropped one single before the album, and this is actually interesting to me. They dropped "Somewhere I Belong" on March 17th, 2003. If we talked about the previous album, Hybrid Theory, they dropped one track before the album, which was "One Step Closer," which didn't even show off Mike Shinoda at that point. It was literally just in a song with Chester Bennington on the vocals. And if you watch actually the music video for it, they have Shinoda mouthing or lip syncing to something, which is literally just Bennington's part. But they dropped "Somewhere I Belong" on March 17, 2003, and that one combines a little bit better with the vocals of both Shinoda and Bennington, which is awesome because Shinoda's an awesome rapper on these albums, and he deserves to be highlighted on the lead single. Then the album dropped on March 25th, 2003, literally 8 days after the first single, which again, another interesting thing, because in a day and age where you'll get multiple singles before the album drops, or even an album stream before the album drops, it's weird to think that there was only one one single dropped literally 8 days before the CD came out. They also had 4 other singles. Faint dropped June 9th, 2003. Numb, September 8th, 2003. From the Inside on January 12th, 2004. And Breaking the Habit on June 14th, 2004. Now, we all know Hybrid Theory is a monumental CD. So how does Meteora stand out? Musically, it's evolved. It has a lot more interesting details. And mostly it's the sampling work on this album. Whether it's "Somewhere I Belong" with the interesting turntables at the beginning, to "Lying From You" with this interesting electronic part where it almost sounds like a siren going off. Hit the Floor has a little bit of interesting electronic work, easier to run, with interesting electronic work in the beginning, and with the verses, just beautiful subdued electronic parts. Faint, of course, one of the most iconic electronic part in all of Linkin Park, with the do 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 before everything else comes in. Such an iconic song. From the Inside, it has some good turntable work. Nobody's Listening has a lot of good electronic work, and there's 2 though that stand out that make a lot of these songs different. So the first one, of course, is Session. It's another song that features mostly Han on it, but also has some piano to break up the action. It's a little bit like Cure from the Itch, but a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it, at least for me. But then you also have "Breaking the Habit," which is mostly an electronic song, and such an interesting one at that. It's the most different sounding song on the album, and it's because of this electronic work, with also the string parts and this staccato guitar line, which is really cool. But it's so different, and at first I didn't like that song, but it's grown on me over the years, and it's just cool how they can remix a lot of these parts. Chester Bennington's vocals on it are really cool, especially the glitchy parts in the second verse. These electronics help bridge and give new life to some of the ideas that they were throwing in on Hybrid Theory. There's also, again, some new instrumentation that's not as done on the previous album. Of course, we talked about the the Shakuhachi, and that one is on Nobody's Listening, which makes another different sounding song because it is the electronics, the more hip hop beat, the Shakuhachi, um, on most of the melody parts, and there is a little bit of electric guitar, but it's mostly palm muted, distorted uh, um, chords. So it's very sedated in that part. So not much of the new metal part. Mostly just a hip hop song, and it's really cool. But you also have some more piano work on this album. Songs like "From the Inside," where you have this offbeat piano chords while you're in a really interesting 6/8 feel. "Numb" has a nice piano part. Easy to Run doesn't really have that, but it kind of feels like it a little bit with the electronics in it. And that's again, it gives new life to a formula that might have been tried and true by that point if they kept doing it exactly the same way. Um, that's not to say that there aren't songs that capture that new metal feeling. Of course, you got "Don't Stay," which has some great guitar parts, especially a flat 2 chord going into the verse, which I really like. "Somewhere I Belong" has some great arpeggiated lines in the verse, but then heavier one note guitar lines in the chorus. "Lying From You" has a little bit more of the hip hop feel, but also has an interesting guitar part, especially on the half step breakdown. "Hit the Floor" again is a little bit more hip hop ish, but has an interesting electronic tinge to the vocals and the guitar, and it's very dirty and sinister sounding, which I love. "Easier to Run" has the heaviness in the chorus, but usually it has this kind of like overtonish guitar and an interesting bass guitar line in the verse. "Faint" has that heavier chorus, but a more sedated and fast-paced verses. "Breaking the Habit," like we said, is mostly sounding different. From the Inside, you have more of this subdued good, piano part at the beginning, and then brings in the heavier part in the chorus. Also uses the flat 2 in the bridge, which I love again. And "Numb," kind of the same thing. Piano at the beginning, more electronic, more heavier at the end. And you can see a little bit of this pattern where there's a more sedated part in the verse, heavier part in the chorus. But I think that a lot of these songs work so well that it never becomes a truly formulaic thing. And by the end, I'm not thinking, wow, it's another song with a quiet verse and a loud chorus. That's not it. And I think the reason for that is not just because of the music, but because of just how Shinoda and Bennington work on this album much better. There's a lot more songs where they're combined and working together as a whole, rather than Bennington being the feature or Shinoda being the feature. Like "Don't Stay" is a Bennington feature. "Easier to Run" is mostly a Bennington feature. "Breaking the Habit" is definitely a Bennington feature, and "Numb" is mostly a Bennington feature as well. And like honestly, the only one that's really a Shinoda feature is "Nobody's Listening." But other than that, it's kind of just a little bit of both. Like "Somewhere I Belong" feels like this callback to "In the End," but honestly a little bit better. "Lying From You" is definitely another one where Shinoda's rapping the verses and Bennington's singing the choruses. With a little bit of screaming. "Hit the Floor," I would say is mostly Shinoda with a lot of screaming on the choruses from Bennington. Easier to Run, again, it is a Bennington feature, but it does have an interesting Shinoda part. Faint, mostly Shinoda, Bennington on the chorus. Figure 9, Shinoda verse, Bennington chorus. From the Inside, a mixture of both. Bennington mostly, and then there are some parts of Shinoda. Nobody's Listening, Shinoda verse, Bennington chorus. Numb, mostly Bennington with a little bit of Shinoda. But the thing is, when it's just a little bit of Shinoda, most of those things are interesting to listen to, and it just works. Like his little part on Easier to Run gives it so much more weight to the song, as well as his one on From the Inside. His nice it's a nice contrast from this more legato melody, and that's the thing. They just work much better together. They've worked longer together, and they know what they want from each other. So I really think that it's some of their best melody work from the Inside, Easy to Run, Numb, like a lot of great melody work, and some of Shinoda's best raps. Faint is an awesome rap, kind of a little bit like Paper Cut, but much better, I would say. Nobody's Listening is a great track for him. Somewhere I Belong, Hit the Floor, Lying From You, all these are great. I love how they've been able to mature the sound and make it more cohesive for them. And then, honestly, the lyrics themselves are better. Like, it doesn't stray away from their themes that they've talked about. Don't Stay is the only one that kind of strays away from it, where they're talking about some people in their the label management that try to take credit for their work while also blaming for them for their failures, if you will. But like Somewhere I Belong is talking about depression and fighting to recover to find a place to belong. Lying From You is talking about lying to someone to try to push them away. Hit the Floor is calling out someone who's a bad influence. Easier to Run is talking about depression and like hiding away from pain, because it's easier to run away from it than dealing with it. Faint is talking about, I want to say, like a mindset or thoughts in someone's head and how you can never get away from it. Figure 9 is talking about a failed relationship and its remains. Breaking the Habit is talking about drug addiction. From the Inside is talking about anxiety and trust issues. Nobody's Listening is basically a call out song to the haters of Linkin Park. And then Numb is talking about the societal and familial norms that someone has to deal with, and how they can't deal with it. So it doesn't really stray away from what they did on Hybrid Theory, but I think the lyrics are better and more descriptive, and that's very nice to hear. I think the Closer is a much better one than Pushing Me Away. It's a little bit more iconic, and like honestly, I think this is a better produced album in general. I think just how a lot of these songs flow onto each other. Forward transitions into Don't Stay, and Don't Stay transitions into Somewhere I Belong. Easier to Run transitions into Faint. Figure 9 transitions into Breaking the Habit. It's really cool how all that flows in on each other, and it's a very memorable thing for me. Like Forward, I haven't talked about it. It's a 15-second intro, but it's so iconic to me because of how it builds into Don't Stay. Just like the initial hit, and then the pulsing like hammer sounds that get faster and faster and faster until you get into Don't Stay, which I think is really cool. The only song that is honestly kind of is Figure 9. Which, first off, I think it's funny that why we call it Figure 9 was the 8th track, but that's just me. Um, it's a song that kind of rehashes some of Hybrid Theory's ideas, and not necessarily in a good way. The guitar parts are kind of sounding like One Step Closer, and I've said on the previous album how much I don't really like One Step Closer, and it just doesn't really bring much to the album. But every other song is great, and it's not saying that Figure 9 is bad. It's just it doesn't bring much to it, if you will. It's the most forgettable song for me. So, you know, a very solid album, a very solid sophomore album that if you haven't listened to, of course listen to it. If you are a Linkin Park fan, and you probably know how good it is. But if you are someone who just listened to Hybrid Theory after me recommending it to you, Meteora is also going to be up there. Definitely take a look. It's a little bit more experimental, but I think that's really cool. Also, a real quick thing, something that I didn't touch on the previous one that I wanted to touch on here is the music videos. I think are really cool, and it's kind of a stylistic thing that the group has done over the years. This kind of technological thing, kind of anime-ish, kind of sci-fi-ish stuff. That's kind of their mainstay in terms of music videos. If you look on, in the end, where it's this colossal tower that they're on, and it's really cool. That's something that they've done. And I would say on Meteora, it kind of continues that idea and actually heightens it to this thing that they'll do throughout their time as a band. Songs like "Somewhere I Belong," they literally have a Gundam in this in the music video. Something like "Breaking the Havoc," which is literally an animated video, kind of like Ghost in the Shell. And even though they still have a couple of singles where it's a little bit more normal kind of music video. I mean, "Faint" is really cool in terms of its production, but it's kind of normal. Just like how the light is barely on them, and then until the end where you can see where they're actually performing. So, "From the Inside" is this song where they're just like walking through a crowd, and then "Numb" it has them in a church while there's another scene going on between a mother and a daughter. But like they're really cool music videos that you'll see over time how they evolve, because it gets to some crazy stuff later in their discography, and I'll definitely talk about it when it happens. But like, if you've never watched their music videos, take a look, because they're really cool. So commercially, this album sold 810,000 copies in the first week alone, and it was debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 in the first week. It was at that point in time ranked the best-selling album on Billboard charts ever. Every single charted in the U.S. except from the Inside. The other 4 hit #1 on the U.S. alt-rock chart, and all but "Faint" hit #1 on the U.S. mainstream chart. "Faint" was #2. By October 2003, Meteora sold nearly 3 million copies and was the 3rd best-selling album in the U.S. during 2003. It did get some award nominations, though not as highly successful as Hybrid Theory. Session was nominated for Grammy Award for Best Rock Instrumental Performance in 2004, but lost to Jeff Beck's Plan B. However, it did win Best Rock Video for "Somewhere I Belong" and Viewer's Choice Award for "Breaking the Habit" at the MTV Awards. In 2004, at the 2004 Radio Music Awards, Numb won Song of the Year, and Linkin Park won Artist of the Year. The album was ranked number 36 on Billboard's Hot 200 Albums of the Decade, and as of June 2014, so it could be a lot more now, but it has sold 6.7 million copies in the U.S. and over 27 million copies worldwide. So, not as successful as the previous one in the U.S. It's sold, about half of what it has in the U.S., but not too far off worldwide, which shows just how awesome this CD is. And when we're going to ranking, you probably can't guess it by now, but I think this is a better album than Hybrid Theory. And I know people are going to hate me for that, but you know what? This is my opinion. We're talking about the best albums, not the most influential albums. If we were talking influential, of course, Hybrid Theory would win in a landslide because it helped bring them into the limelight. It helped secure them as an awesome rap and metal and new metal band. 30 million copies worldwide is nothing to sniff at, But 27 million isn't too far off. And honestly, I think with the smaller deadline and being able to work together as a group more cohesively on something completely new made for an interesting album. I didn't mention it, but Farrell was on this album where he was barely on it on the first one, so that does make a difference. They co-produce it, that makes a difference because they were able to throw in their ideas. And with the amount of time that they had to do it, I think it pulls off a much more cohesive, much more mature, much more experimental album than Hybrid Theory. There's nothing wrong with Hybrid Theory. I love it. It's just there are 4 or 5 songs that kind of sound similar in style, and that's because they were new to this. But also, there's also the fact that Hybrid Theory was something that they've been working on for years. In different iterations, whether it was on Zero, whether it was on Hybrid Theory, they were working on this. They already had most of these songs done. They just had to remix them. So they had more and more years to work with this material. But to be able to come up with something brand new, it works better. And I talk about reanimation and how good it is, but I also think that it might be a reason why I don't like Hybrid Theory as much as Meteora, because a lot of the songs in Reanimation are interesting, and I say better than the ones on Hybrid Theory. Crawling is a phenomenal ending song, and a beautiful one at that, and they hint it throughout the album. And, that version of Crawling with Stain's lead singer, phenomenal. In the end, the newer one has a jaunty feel and a little bit glitched out feel, and not saying that's better than the original in the end, but it's not too far off. Forgotten has this very sinister sound. For the most part, all these songs that have been remixed sound more interesting than the ones on Hybrid Theory. And I think that's a shortcoming for Hybrid Theory because it's not like a lot of the songs are iconic, but they don't stray away from a lot of the formula. So I'm going to say that that Meteora is better than Hybrid Theory, and if we put it on the list up there, you'll see that Hybrid Theory is number 2, and Meteora is number 1. But we still have 5 other albums to go. And before I finish, just one quick thing to transition into our next one. So there was one interesting Rolling Stone review that I saw that basically had the line saying that this album basically used up all the material that they can on a tried and true formula, which is hinting at this is a good album, but we're getting to a point where new metal and rap metal aren't as popular and are kind of getting, tried and true. So it's interesting to see what would happen next. But also, there is this little tiff that Linkin Park had with Warner Brothers while this album was coming out due to financial issues as well as trust issues. They did settle it and had a new contract in 2005, but it's curious to see how that affects future albums. So if you watch this, again, I'm sorry that this takes so long. I think this is probably going to be around the time that for all these ones, maybe 20 minutes, who knows. We'll try to get it condensed to there. But if you like this and have watched the whole thing, thank you so much. Of course, a couple different things. Like the video. Comment on if you think Meteora or Hybrid Theory is the better album. Share this with your friends, subscribe to my channel, and just keep on watching. So, like I said, tomorrow will be cover song, Tuesday will be an Are You In, and then Wednesday or Thursday will be part 3 of this Diving Through Discography with Minutes to Midnight. So, I'll see you then. Peace.